Welcome, Drink with James, episode 151. We're here with Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is
Taylor
great.
is a staff writer at The Atlantic. She covers the internet. She covers meme culture, youth culture.
Influencers, the whole shebang.
The whole shebang. We met when you reporting a story, I think.
Yeah, like pretty recently.
I think it was like a year ago, and I was like, oh shit, I'm going to be in a Taylor article. This is going to be fantastic. And then I wasn't in it.
I
don't know what it was for.
Yeah,
but
right.
I was totally left out of it.
Yeah, my editor's always cutting my stories.
I was feeling myself. I was like, I slayed that interview.
You were in like a bunch of other articles.
I was, yes. But since then, we've worked on a few articles together, and I have been so impressed over the last few years, again, of just your kind of rise to this spot in internet culture where you have become, if not the person reporting on it, certainly one of the big voices in it.
Thank you.
I was excited to bring you on. One, it's the first kind of non-influencer we've
I know,
we've
I'm
had.
honored. Yeah. My
First,
Instagram is probably the worst of everyone that's ever appeared on this show.
that might be true. That might be true, but that's not why you're here.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for y'all to kind of see the other side of the industry. And I think, the hope is that we're going to be able to talk about kind of broad things and thinking about broader internet culture and kind of what that means for influencers. So let's jam.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start with the simple stuff. How do you end up doing what you're doing?
Yeah. It's kind of weird, like windy. I've only been as we have said before, like I'm a staff writer at The Atlantic.
Yeah.
I write about internet culture, memes, social media, influencers, things like that. And I've only been writing for about 2 years full time, but I've mostly worked in like social strategy at different media organizations.
Okay. I feel like just right now, any writer watching this is going to just like, they're just going to be like dying, being like, you've only written for 2 years. 'Cause you definitely have like, I feel like, especially in the last 6 months, like have emerged as like, insofar as I can tell, like the writer who's talking about influencers, the internet, meme culture, youth culture on the internet. So it's shocking that you've only done it for 2 years.
Yeah, I worked in media before, but I was always just on the more strategy side, and I would write like working in media, like you write random pieces, and I had a lot of friends at different organizations that wanted me to write more. So I would write like one-off thing for New York Mag or BuzzFeed or whatever. But I was kind of nervous to make the jump into like full-time reporting, writing.
It's not a career change that like a lot of people are doing right now.
Yeah, I know. It's like scary, and I don't know, strategy also is a little bit safer. Like your name's not out there. Like if you fuck something up, it's really just the people at your company know. Mm-hmm. But my freelance stuff had done really well, and I was really interested in this beat that I cover, which is sort of exactly what I just said, like, social media, influencers, internet culture. That's what I always wanted to write about full time. So I actually did try to get like other writing jobs over the years, but they would never let me write about this beat. And so I would just do these one-off pieces. And a couple years ago, I had done a bunch of freelance pieces for Mike.com. RIP, it's not around anymore. Yeah. But that stuff had done really well, and a bunch of editors had noticed it. And so Noah Shackman at the Daily Beast, who hired me before The Atlantic, was like, just come here, you can write about this stuff all the time. And as soon as I did, it took off, and now, it's a beat at a lot of other places.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so now I want to just like take a large step back to like, small Taylor in Connecticut, or in Switzerland where you went to high school. I had my assistant do like a bunch of reading on you, so I was
oh
like,
my God, I don't know what's out there.
I know where you went to high school, I know where everything, I know it all. But like, were you always interested in writing? Like,
No.
Growing up, it wasn't something you just like did?
No, I hate writing. I'm very dyslexic. So no, I always had a lot of weird projects growing up. I had a lot of jobs. Like I started interning when I was 12 for this like artist that I found. I always had internships all through high school.
It's not even legal. I can't.
I know. I had a lot of weird like off the table job or under the table job type things. But yeah, so I kind of always wanted to have like projects and do things on the side. But I mean, I was just kind of a bored kid growing up. I was really into like art and horseback riding, and I wasn't like a total horse girl, but I was a little bit of one.
Well, listen, you're born in Connecticut. You don't really have a choice.
I know. It's like a meme now to make fun of girls that are like horse girls, and I'm like, oh, I want to laugh, but also that was me. But yeah, I didn't know I was even like, that I would even consider a career in like media, I guess, until after college, when I sort of got into Tumblr in like 2009, and I met other people in media, and I kind of like started to follow news. I was very much like in my own world growing up. I didn't really read a lot of news. I was just kind of on, AIM all day chatting with friends.
Obviously.
Like a normal.
Yeah. And it's funny, I didn't know that kind of time in Tumblr was when you got into this world a little bit, because it is, kind of how I got pulled into this whole world as well, was through a Tumblr following.
Didn't you go to Dubai or something at one point? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, which was like one of the first like influencer trips there was, which is hilarious. And that's why I met Amanda, who I know you work with at the Atlantic, and that Tumblr class, I think, produced a lot of people who are now living, out in this world, influencer, like doing strategy, things that I'm doing or writing about it. It was kind of a special time on the internet. Yeah. Is that where you were like, oh, there's something interesting going on here? Yeah,
so basically I graduated, I had done all these fashion internships at like YSL, Donna Karan and stuff like that, in celebrity dressing and PR in college. Graduated, I was doing public relations for Ferragamo, I hated it. I quit and just was like temping and working random jobs. I was like at the Vineyard Vines call center for a while. It was so stupid. Anyway.
I just honestly like, is the Vineyard Vines call center like branded? Is it like all?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of pink whales.
Okay.
Like the tote bags all over. I mean, it was a much smaller company back then too. It wasn't even like what it is now.
That's incredible.
But as you mentioned, I'm from Connecticut. The owner is kind of from my hometown, and so I got this job. And it was the easiest customer service ever, because the customers were really nice. They'd be like, my polo shirt frayed, and you'd send them a new one, and
they'd be happy.
Yeah. But I was kind of dicking around and didn't know what I wanted to do. And this girl that I sat next to at one of my temp jobs introduced me to Tumblr. And literally, James, like I learned about it on like a Tuesday, and by that Friday, I had like 4 Tumblrs, and I was spending like 16 hours a day on it. I was like, this is like, what is this world?
Yeah.
Like, I love it. I just got like heavily into Tumblr. So I kind of just was working day jobs and doing Tumblr stuff, and started to be more successful at it. I made a bunch of like, you probably remember this, like when it was like those single serving Tumblrs were big.
Yeah.
I made a bunch of ones like that.
What was your favorite one that you made?
I made a bagels. My 2 bigger ones were a bagels one. It was like bagels or something stupid .tumblr.com, where I just reblogged bagels.
Yep.
And then another one about.
It's a simpler time on the
internet.
It
was like also you could do that, and like I remember if you got like I got like 5,000 followers on one, and it was like the biggest. I was like, I am a viral like icon. So I don't know, I kind of got really into that, and I met a lot of people through Tumblr. I went to like a Tumblr meetup.
Same.
And just like made friends with all these awesome people and other creators, and so I just kind of thought that this is what I wanted to do. This ad agency sort of like noticed my Tumblr success and hired me to run social for brands at McGarry Bowen, which was sort of at its peak at that time. It was like Adweek Ad Agency of the Year, and so we got to work on all these amazing sort of brand. This was also before like brand social media was bad. Yeah. It was like, and there weren't a lot of metrics around it either. Like just to have a Facebook page was like considered a win.
Yeah.
So it was really easy.
Nobody was taking this stuff seriously. And I think that like something we talk about on the show, and I think the frustration for a lot of influencers entering this space now is that like a lot of the most successful people in the industry right now started back then. The internet was such a small place. I mean, to your point, I remember 2009, 2010 having 20 or 30,000 followers on Tumblr, and that was so like insane.
Massive.
That was I mean, that was one of the most followed people in the world, and that is nothing.
I know, now you're like, oh, what, 100,000 Twitter followers? Like, get out of here.
I couldn't even get like free moisturizer for 30,000 followers now, But the internet was like such a small place.
It was so small. And I felt like, I mean, I feel like so much of the way that you grow is through like collaboration. And I felt like back then it was so easy to like collaborate on things. Like, I don't know, my friends and I used to make Tumblrs together and do projects together. And I feel like being like young and on the internet was like, I felt like I knew everyone else that was like young and on the internet at that time in New York. And like, I don't even know what that's like now. Like maybe people feel like that in LA if you're like, you know, in a group of YouTubers, but it's so big and everyone's online and yeah.
Do you think that like it was the lack of money that created that?
Yeah, the lack of money, and there wasn't an infrastructure around it. I mean, like I sort of got in a bunch of like early BuzzFeed listicles, and I feel like, you know, I was just thinking of BuzzFeed also and a bunch of these media companies, like their rise also paralleled this like social media rise, and you know, there wasn't anybody covering it, so the media wasn't writing about a lot of the stuff that was happening there, unless it was like maybe Daily Dot or something. But no one was really paying attention to it. And so, and the brands were kind of like, oh, nice to be on there, but who knows what's really happening. So now there's so much money that there's so much more accountability and it's so much more competitive. And
I think it's interesting that like you started there, and a lot of what you cover now is these kind of strange corners of the internet, right? And the internet back then was full of kind of weirdos, right? Like it was not mainstream at all, right? The only reason I was able to like be a photographer was because normal photographers that actually were making it would never put photos on the internet. So like it was just full of kind of weirdos, right? I mean, and inside a group of weirdos, there's always a sense of community because it's like, oh, I've never met a weirdo like me, and now I have all these weird friends, and we like meet up at a bar because we are all on Tumblr, which again, it feels so weird to think about that now. But do you think that like you're attracted to these kind of sub-communities on the internet because that is like what the internet was for you when you fell in love with it? Yeah,
like my big obsession, I think like the internet completely changed, like getting online, I guess. Like, I mean, I had like Facebook in college, and but I always sort of thought the internet was for like losers and nerds. Like I never had a MySpace, which was such an oversight because I felt like when I got on Tumblr, I was like, oh my God, this is actually my people. And like these are, I was exposed to like all these weird things that I had never, you know, known about growing up in Connecticut, which is so, you know, just vanilla. And so what I try to write about now and like what I'm attracted to now is sort of like those similar like aspects, and like maybe that's like teens doing something weird on Instagram or like some corner, like some Discord community for some niche interest. Like I guess it reminds me of kind of like the good part of the internet and like what I loved about the internet. And I think the internet's power, which is ultimately like helping people communicate and connect. And you know, we've seen the bad side of that with like all of this bad stuff on Facebook and stuff like that. But my favorite stories are about the sort of more positive corners and how that can, you know, be beneficial, I guess, to people.
I think that those smaller community like support you mentioned, like it felt like you like kind of had this support network for creativity, right? Like it did feel like back then that, you know, everyone was learning this stuff as they went, and there wasn't a huge amount of judgment.
There was no judgment, and there was no, like, I think a lot today about like sort of this like call out culture and, you know, always trying to like bring someone down. It's just it's more toxic. Back then it was very like rah rah, and we hadn't really seen all like the negative effects of these platforms. It was all like, wow, like brave new world, Twitter's great, you know, like and so it felt more optimistic and exciting, and people I think were just like friendly and, you know, happy to help. They didn't take the stuff that you were posting in bad faith.
Right. Does that still exist somewhere?
Yeah, I think it exists in like weird corners, but it's closed communities that it exists in, like Discord groups, right? Or like Facebook groups. Like I recently wrote a thing on like Facebook tag groups where, you know, in some cases they have over 100,000, you know, users, but that's ultimately small compared to like, you know, all of Instagram or all of Twitter. Right. So I think it exists, but it's just only in these small communities, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah. And as you think about that transition, which has to happen, right? Like when something goes from that small to like as important as it is, like, you know, I think about it, like I miss that, you know, when I started this business even, it was about creating beautiful, like being an influencer, which the word didn't exist, but was either about educating people, like I'm a beauty blogger or a fashion blogger, and I'm gonna actually spend time and like educate my followers on what I know, or it was like I'm pursuing art in some way, right? It was about the work, not the person, which has obviously changed so much. It's essentially impossible to really have a following now if you're not just like so hyper me focused. You've been watching this from, I think that like the perspective you have as a reporter and kind of looking at this is so much different than me trying to make money on it. What do you think that changed? Because it was such a fundamental shift in the internet, and it wasn't even Instagram. Like, yes, Instagram did start being like people taking photos of other things, not themselves.
Yeah.
But it was the whole internet was about that, and then it was all of a sudden not about that. What do you think that was?
I mean, it's funny. Well, I write a lot about YouTube and like early YouTuber culture, which is also something I was very into. And I feel like, I mean, obviously Instagram, sort of shepherded in this entire class of influencers. But I think like YouTube creators also going more mainstream, also kind of like, it sort of widened the pool. Like being a YouTuber became more normalized. There was a lot more money being invested in, and it wasn't just like, hey, I have this channel where I'm going to teach you how to play guitar or put on makeup. It's now like, this is my lifestyle, or this, like, I don't know, it gave room for more creativity. There's also just more sort of social platforms. I mean, obviously we had Tumblr. Tumblr is more about expression than like self-branding, I felt like.
You didn't even have your name out there most of the time, right?
Yeah.
It was like bagel, bagel, bagel.
Oh my God, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Wait, let me fix this. No, it wasn't about your name. I mean, which is sort of like how teens use Instagram now, though. It's rarely about, I mean, you have like a default public profile, like, I mean, you probably had yours too. Like, you have your default public Tumblr, but then you have all these like, sort of places to express yourself. So I think like, I mean, Instagram is kind of like filled in that spot, and Twitter, and I mean, the whole internet is just about expression now, to a fault. Yeah.
I mean, expression, but like, it feels like, and again, maybe it's just the world I'm in, and I'm interested in your perspective. It feels so hyper, like, egocentric.
Yeah.
Of like, the only thing I want to express is how fucking great I am.
Well, people, I think, realized, like, especially in the past year, like, I feel like it's like people realized, like, oh, there's power in having an audience, kind of, and oh, like, it's all about me, it's all about my brand, and it's less about creating something, it's all me. And it's like, I think it's weird because those are actually not really the people that like you want to follow the most, or like it's actually not best for your brand to like, you want to like just self-promote and self-promote and self-promote. And it's like, you have to also make sure that you're creating something interesting that's not like so directly tied to you. But yeah, it is like, I don't know like what led to that shift other than competition, where now like this is people saw how much money is in this industry, and now everyone wants part of it. And it can be hard because it's like you see people like influencers or like, like internet people or celebrities like promoting themselves, and it's like you want to emulate that, but there's so much more that goes into it. It's not just like being out there and taking pictures and like self-promoting. It's also like so much of this like creation and strategy that happens behind the scenes that makes those people successful. So yeah.
It is tough, and like I think it is a difficult world to operate in for influencers, even because it's like the stuff that does well is photos of you.
Yeah.
Right? And so like, I mean, I even had an influencer on here who was like, challenged me maybe a year and a half ago. She was like, take a photo of yourself every day with iPhone, not like, I used to be a photographer, so I'm still like, she was like, iPhone photo, smiling, looking at the camera every day for 30 days. My growth rate was like up 700%. Like, that's what people want to see, but like it didn't interest me to do that, and it feels kind of like, oh, like it's you got to give them props, because it's like, some people are just totally shameless. They don't give a shit. They're just like, this is me. I'm living. And props to them. And some, I do think there is a struggle of like they don't like doing this, but it's their job now. Like they don't like having to be like me.
Yeah, it's a grind, and it's hard to pivot away from that. I mean, I think that's like the way to get away from it, I guess, is to kind of like develop a brand, maybe that your own like product line or something that's like you can promote a little bit, but it's like not directly tied to you or your name or like your photo out there. But it's hard because people are following you for you. They're not following you for some other thing. So it's kind of hard. I will say like teenagers seem to be more fluid with that though. Like, I mean, I recently wrote about like a bunch of, I'm working on a thing on Emma Chamberlain. I don't know if she's this YouTuber, and she's sort of part of this like group of like kind of slackery type YouTubers. Like it's very like Billie Eilish, like chill. And I think at least, you know, this could just be because like teenagers are notoriously kind of lazy and, you know, don't like anything hyper produced. But like, you know, there is this desire to follow people that are like more chill and not so like staging, you know, the pics all the time. And
well, I think it's like, you know, that article you wrote about the death of the Instagram aesthetic that did so well. It was, you know, interesting to start thinking about it, and I think we talked about it on the show a few times. But it was like, I've been around long enough. I'm not that old, but like to remember grunge, which like coming out of the '80s, it was like there was so much money. The economy was doing so well. Everything was so like perfect and like fake. And then grunge came, which was just like, it was cool to be dirty and look like, you know, like you didn't give a shit. And we're back in a place where the economy is like absolutely slaying. It's all about how beautiful I am and how, you know, beautiful my life is. So it's not crazy that teenagers are now like, what's the one thing I can do? Which is just like look like a total deadbeat.
Exactly.
So it feels like it's just like that whole thing happening again.
I think there's definitely like a shift, and you know, it's just also like, I mean, as like a millennial, it's like you're just starting to age out a little bit, and like with that generation, like a different aesthetic is going to come behind you. And so I think platforms will have to adapt to that. It's also, I mean, these platforms have made a lot of changes away from just the photo feed, you know, like for instance, people engaging more with stories, which is less curated and less, you know, sort of staged, I guess. So yeah.
What do you think, you know, you obviously focus a decent amount on youth culture. I think something we talk to our clients about a decent amount is like how important it is to stay connected to youth culture, especially as a marketer, right? And you start to feel it as you get older. I just turned 35, you were at my birthday party, where you start to be like, I am understanding this less and less, which is dangerous, because if you're supposed to, if you know, you have to be able to understand a world to be able to market to it. So I want to dive more into like what you're seeing in youth culture in a bit, but I think the first question is just like, for the influencers watching now, I feel like, you know, the proverbial clock is ticking on their ability to be effective insofar as advertisers are concerned, because they're going to start wanting, you know, the more grungy, they want younger. I mean, this is a trend that has always happened. Is that something, as far as influencers are concerned, that you think about? Is like, how long can they keep doing this?
Yeah, so I mean, it is so hard. That's something that like people have dealt with in entertainment for a long time, where it's like, you know, how do you as like an actor or actress sort of maintain your audience and your fans? I mean, most people do that like through different vehicles like movies and things like that. And I would say with, you know, influencers, they have to either decide whether they're gonna like what are they gonna pivot their brand to? Like people want new things all the time. You know, if they are gonna age, you know, with their millennial audience, like what does that look like, and what, you know, how can their I don't know, goals realign with that? But it's hard.
I think it's hard because it's like, even if you're like, well, my audience is aging with me, my feeling is that like, right, but advertisers don't give a shit.
No,
like advertisers want young.
They want
and
young
new.
people. I know.
And like, it doesn't matter if your audience still loves you. If you're not directly making money from your audience, if you're still, you know, influencers are 95% advertising supported. Like, this is a huge reckoning that I think that like they're just ignoring, being like, I'm just gonna buy $1.5 million house and it's gonna be totally okay.
No, save your money. I have a lot of friends that made it big on YouTube, and some of them, you know, kind of quit and have lost, you know, you think that the money is going to flow forever, and it doesn't. And that's true in a lot of businesses, you know, like your income doesn't always go up, it goes up and down, and so you need to prepare yourself.
This is going to turn into just like a financial responsibility.
Save your money. I know, right? Like I'm a poor journalist, so whatever, I don't know. But yeah, it is hard. I mean, like in terms of like youth, you're never going to compete with those kinds of like, you know, with young people. You're never going to do that. So I think it's finding brands that you want to align yourself with next, you know, like say you are moving into that next phase of your career, like what are some of those aspirational, who are you the young person for? You know, maybe you're a young 30-something mom, and like you know, you can take the spot of another, you know, influencer that's aging out of that, whose kids are too old, and, you know, so you kind of have to like retarget, I guess, like the brands that you're aspiring to work with.
And I think that like important to say that, because I know I'm going to get messages about it. Like, I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
I don't think advertisers are, you know, smart to only focus on youth culture, really.
Yeah.
But it is just a fact that like isn't really going to change.
I mean, it's
soon.
true. I mean, I totally agree, and I say that as someone's like, I mean, you know, obviously advertisers should work with everyone, but you're not ever selling to everyone. Like, as every influencer knows, like you can't appeal to everyone. You have to appeal, you know, to a specific demographic, and some companies too have like maybe the majority of their main campaign is like, you know, about youth culture, but they also do outreach in certain things, or you know. Yeah. So yeah, you know, maybe you have teenage kids and you can do some kind of family type of thing.
Just get your kids on.
Just have kids and then wait till they're teens and then yeah.
And you know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on influencers like creating product or doing lines. This is obviously, I think, like, you know, I talk about influencers like exiting, like they need to have an exit and figure out what the rest of their lives are going to be like. And that is certainly a popular one, but I think a difficult road to go by. I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on if influencers should be doing that, or you know.
I think you should do that if you are like a strategic business owner. Like, I'm sure you saw this post that was kind of like going viral last week of like, oh, I'm an influencer. I only sold like 3 t-shirts and I have 2 million followers. Like, ugh. But like so many people are commenting like, first of all, how bad do you have to be to, I mean, that's bad. Like, that's insane. Bad. That's bad. Yeah. Like, and also, you know, her line was terrible. And then I think she was like, whatever. I don't know the details of it. But, you know, even if you're marginally good, it's still hard. And owning a business is hard, and running a business is hard. So I think it's, you know, maybe you test the waters a little bit. Like maybe you do, you know, start doing these collaborations with Nordstrom's or whatever, where you try out designing your own top, and then eventually you do launch your own clothing line or something. But I think like, don't jump into it. I think there's a lot of like companies that will let like sell you white label products that you can then market. And I would also, you know, just don't jump into anything like that, you know, and think about whether this is a business you want to run post Instagram, post, you know, influencer life. Because a lot of times like a brand like theoretically should live on, or, you know, throughout your life, you want to keep it going. It's like opening a small business, like opening a retail store, you know, type of thing.
And I think that like, it's interesting because I do think that influencers are generally disrespected, especially by like establishment, anything, advertising, media, everything. I think it's really hard work. I think it's a different kind of hard work than running a business. And I think that is not totally understood sometimes when like you wake up every day and you've got 10 hours of just like you just focusing on you, right? Like creating content or answering emails or going to meetings, right? Is different than like slogging away on your 5th edit of a piece that like you just can't get to the place where you want it to be, or
I think of like, I mean, you know, you're going to have to deal with supply chain issues. You're going to have to deal with vendors. You're going to have to deal with returns. Like, it's all of the stuff that you have to think about when you're launching a product. Branding, like, it's not just like slapping your name on something, which I think sometimes it can, like a lot of influencers do those types of things. And I think those are not the brands that are going to, you know, sustain.
So what do you think, like, I mean, what do you think happens? I mean, if you're a 35-year-old influencer. You presumably have to be making money for another 30 years.
Right.
If you're smart with your money and you save it, like maybe, you know, 25, 20. But like what do you do? Like what? Yeah, I mean, that's a long time, you know?
I know, it's so long. Life is so long. I just saw a tweet before I came here, though. There was an article from Vice that said like the world is going to end in 2050, and I was like, oh. And then I was like, haha, good. Like, you know, whatever. I don't have to figure my life out. But then I was like, 2050 is still a long time away. Like, I have to figure that out. I think like, and I would tie this also back to a lot of YouTubers. Because I've covered YouTube for a long time, and a lot of early YouTubers like went a lot of different ways. And I think influencers today's like sort of modern, you know, multi-platform influencers, Instagram influencers could, you know, take a lesson from their playbook in the sense of like, I think you either go the traditional entertainment route where you realize that you have a real skill in, you know, maybe it's styling photo shoots, maybe it's, you know, editing content, you know, becoming more into videography, photography, that type of stuff, or, you know, or working in the entertainment industry in some way as a host, you know. and if you don't want to do that and you do want to go the more entrepreneurship route, that's another thing you could take. And maybe it is opening a small brand, or maybe it's just working in-house at a brand. There are some early YouTubers that now do marketing at Google, for instance, and things like that. So I think it's really good to make as many connections, as you can when you're at your peak. Like, you really want to develop your audience and not just develop a bunch of fans in wherever, that might be loyal to you, but develop relationships with valuable people, I guess, that could kind of hire you down the line, if you need it, because you might end up in a corporate job, and that might be great. You might be a marketing director at Clinique, running influencer campaigns.
Right. And I feel like I bang the drum on this so much because I saw what happened to Tumblr. Yeah. And obviously Tumblr was it happened so fast.
Yeah.
Where I had 120,000 followers or something and was getting 30,000 likes a photo, and then in a year it was just gone. Yeah. And there will be a new platform, and we're going to talk about that. Maybe it'll be TikTok, probably not. Something else. Yeah. And the influencers who are successful today will have essentially no chance of being successful on that platform because it will be driven by youth culture. Yeah. And the advertising dollars will go to that new platform, and they'll slowly go away from Instagram. It doesn't matter if you have followers, right? I still have 120,000 followers on Tumblr. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I might as well have 2. Yeah. Because they don't log in. Yeah. They don't care. Yeah. Because there's a new shiny thing.
Exactly.
And that, it happened so fast on Tumblr, and thank God I had just been I was going to do this business. Yeah. Anyway, this wasn't, being on Tumblr wasn't going to be my life, but
I think of that too, in just the sense that I feel like I was on Tumblr and these platforms early enough that it was easy to scale an audience, to get attention from enough important people, I guess you could say, but also smart enough to pivot that into a career and get off, not tie everything to that,
I feel like the Tumblr class mostly did that, went and got jobs.
Yeah, everyone either got jobs, went into YouTube, went into because I know some people became creators and stuff too. But other people didn't. One girl I know from Tumblr sort of actually still has the same job that she did when she was at Tumblr, but works for this company. But sort of just had a big kind of she was into kind of the I don't know, not Star Wars type thing, but kind of nerd culture type thing. Yeah. It's not my world. But, had this really popular kind of blog around that for a while, and then just kind of, Tumblr died and let it go, and that was fine, and it's a fine project. Yeah. And, that can be fine. If it's not, something you want to do, it's fine. But I think for probably people like you and I that really wanted to exploit it, we were able to exploit it at the right time. I would say Vine is the same. Yeah. If you look at the current class of top YouTubers, a lot of them were Viners that used the platform to get big really quick, but got out a year before it collapsed. They saw the writing on the wall, read the tea leaves, and were okay, I'm going to try to diversify and get on YouTube. Yeah. And the ones that didn't, like you said, lost it overnight. So yeah, Instagram feels like it's going to be around forever, but they could regulate things, break up Facebook, it could fall apart. Right. And yeah,
it does feel more stable.
It is stable. It's bigger. It's bigger.
Yeah, it's just part of the
It's so part of culture in a way that those other platforms weren't. But so was MySpace. So was a lot of other stuff. So
and Vine and now TikTok. Yeah. I think that I know you're into TikTok, and I missed Vine, and I think all that stuff is hilarious. But it's tough because, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on advertisers and TikTok, and can they start to take some of that money? Because I think one of the hard things is it's hard to be funny, and it's hard to, it is hard to create memes and have it work, and then I think most brands just aren't funny. They're not interested in comedy because
well, brands on the TikTok can run interstitials, so it's not they have to create native content, which I think is a bonus. It's not Instagram where you have to have this whole presence. But Instagram you can run interstitial ads too. But the thing with TikTok is one, it's owned by this giant, massive Chinese conglomerate called ByteDance, which I think people are going to be increasingly skeptical of. 2, right now, they've only launched last August, so it hasn't really been around since even a year. And the parent company is spending an enormous amount of money marketing it right now. So that's the reason why it's sort of so successful and so many teens are on it. And who knows their retention rates? I saw somebody saying that it's only a 30% retention over 30 days, which is really low. So is it just going to be a new, app that's popular and fizzles out? That could be. I do think that allows for a type of expression that almost only teenagers are good at, where it's very weird, it's very niche, it's very driven by meme culture. The editing is crazy on it.
Yeah.
Like the good TikToks are like very weird and but that doesn't, that could create a different kind of social network that like, a beauty brand that might not want to advertise there. You know what I mean? Taco Bell can be there. Yeah. I saw the Washington Post is on TikTok now. That's fine.
Yeah, I was like Burger King, Taco Bell.
Consumer brands like that
are
for sure.
Super rooted in like youth culture and have like been into like meme culture and stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't see like a luxury brand like, Ferragamo would not be on TikTok or something like that. So
and if they did, it would be tragic.
It would be weird and different, and maybe they will as the formats evolve on TikTok. But right now, it's not a fit. And so you have to think about that. Like, what are the actual competitive, platforms? Like, does Pinterest get really big? Does another, some other thing come out of left field?
I mean, like, what happens now? Because it's like, I was excited about Snapchat many years ago, and they kind of shit the bed, honestly.
Yeah,
like, yes, Instagram like came in and took their business, but like
they threw it away.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was like,
disaster.
It was a total disaster.
I mean, it's still mismanaged. They can't get their act together at all. And and it's hard. I mean, when these companies come up, like it's so competitive. It's so hard. As Snapchat's shown, Snapchat had all these bad theories about like discovery that I think hindered the app, where they were like, oh, we're gonna make it impossible to find people.
I mean, like why they didn't build people's followings up so that they were so big that they couldn't abandon it? I don't know.
Well, also you had people like Kylie Jenner, Rihanna, you had all these big names, and then Snapchat went out of its way to like, sort of bury those people and not make it hard. They didn't offer like, special creator profiles, verification. It's all crazy. Anyway, but I also think
couldn't even see how many followers you had.
I know, it's crazy. The whole thing was wild, and they're all of those. I mean, it was really mismanaged as a company in general. But I think that there is a hunger for kind of new and interesting platforms. But I think it's hard too. We're also in this era of like tech backlash where it's going to be very hard. Like no platform is going to scale to the level of Facebook, Instagram, YouTube without huge amount of public scrutiny. I mean, TikTok is already experiencing that. Obviously, they have this kind of sketchy owner. So I think it's going to be hard, but it's not like, people are always like, I'm sure they ask you this too. Like, I don't know. I feel like as a reporter, they're like, what's the new Instagram? Next? What's next? It's like, I don't know. But if people are so hyped to it that you'll hear about it because everyone is online now. It's not like, Tumblr was coming up and all these other big companies, YouTube was coming up where like it was under the radar. Like now there's an awareness of it.
My test is always like, what do I check first thing in the morning? And I used to check Tumblr.
Yeah.
And then one day I just like, my friends all left. Because I think at the end of the day, like influencer culture and everything is obviously really important. I think most people follow a couple influencers. That's what we built this tool back when the API was different that allowed us to find out like how many of your followers follow me, and how many of my followers follow you, etc. And we would pick two influencers that were like, they hung out all the time. They were exactly the same, essentially. And the overlap would be like 15%, which was crazy.
Yeah.
And I think that like most people follow like one or two influencers.
Yeah.
And most of it is just your friends, And like one day my friends left Tumblr and they went to Instagram, and so I started checking Instagram. And then one day they were on Snapchat, and like I would wake up in the morning and I'd want to know who was out really late last night, who's up this morning, what's going on, what are my friends up to? Like this is what I actually give a shit about, not like your skincare routine. And then I wasn't checking Instagram, so I was like, holy shit, Snapchat's gonna have a go at it. And then obviously,
Instagram stories.
And now I just don't see.
Actually, an increasing number of people are spending time in smaller groups. So like, group chat is obviously on the rise. Platforms like Discord, which are sort of, like it's like almost like a Slack type of competitor.
I actually don't really even know
that one. It's really popular for like, it's gamers. Yeah.
That's how they like talk
to
each other. But like
teens and YouTubers are also really into it. Cause like, it's like if you're a 13-year-old gamer, like you're not just going to talk about gaming. Like you also want to follow lots of other people, talk to your friends. It's just a really easy sort of like chat platform.
We've done some gamer activations, and they're like, we had to download Discord because they're like, we don't use anything else. That's the only way we communicate.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a very like I mean, yeah, that platform has enormous relevance in that community. And, you know, so you might just see like things like that, you know, people moving towards, you know, these smaller types of like closed communities, groups, Facebook groups, things like that. Because it's also, I mean, you feel more connected with those people. It's a better user experience because it's usually moderated. And it's like where your friends are kind of already. Yeah. But yeah, that just makes it harder for marketers because it's harder to like closed, enter into those spaces.
They're like closed spaces. I want to go down this bigger picture thing for a bit and then do some more like advice for influencers. A broad question is like, I think a lot of the conversation around the internet is like, is this been good for society?
Yeah.
You know, like, do you feel like, and I know you struggle on Twitter with like any reporter, especially any female reporter. With
who isn't struggling on Twitter with haters?
I mean, I'm not because nobody gives a shit. And I don't, but like, you know, that conversation of like, has this been a force of good in the world or a force of evil? And I'm wondering on most days where you lie on that.
Yeah, well, it's hard. I mean, like with so many people, right? You have trolls, and you have some days where like these people get to you, and or at least me, where I'm like, oh, like, you know, it makes me so mad, or like, you know, they're on some campaign to dox me, and I'm like, why? Are you doing that? So, you know, some days that parts of it feels really bad. I mean, Twitter's particularly bad because the platform doesn't give a shit about, you know, user safety in a lot of ways. You know, Instagram's a little bit better. You can filter out comments and things like that. But, you know, everyone's experienced those trolls, people hating on them. And obviously, we've had so many problems with, like, you know, democracy and the ways that, like, all of these things have shaped, you know, politics. We got extremism, all of these bad things. I spent 2 years like working in politics in DC at this place called The Hill, which is a political news outlet. And I kind of just like maxed out on politics about 2 years ago. And I just like, I don't know, since then I've tried to like really proactively ignore the bad parts of the internet and like focus on the good parts of the internet, kind of for my own sanity, but also because I felt like there's so much focus on like these very serious, terrible things, which is like great. Like that should be reported on, that should be focused on. But I think there's these other areas of the internet that are like bubbling up behind it that are undercovered and that are more like, I guess, optimistic and positive. You know, like I read a lot about teens and kind of these interesting spaces and interesting forms of expression, and they're all really positive. So I'm still an optimist about that stuff. Like I kind of have to be, otherwise I'll just be depressed and never log on. But so yeah, like, I mean, for me, I kind of just like proactively ignore as much negative stuff as possible and mute anything even remotely negative, you know, from my Twitter feed. Try to not pay attention to trolls and focus on this positive stuff and hope that stuff will kind of prevail. I think like norms are changing too, and a lot of times what you see with like tech and innovation is like, you know, some new technology comes along, like everyone's like, this is the best thing to ever happen, you know, wow. And then of course there's the correction where you're like, okay, well actually it's all, you know, all these bad things are happening, and then it usually sort of nets out somewhere in between. So
you think we're about to enter the correction?
I think soon. Yeah, like pretty soon. I think that like we're just suddenly realizing the power that all of these platforms have in our lives. Like obviously all the political stuff, but also with influencers. Like people are like realizing like, oh my God, like this is actually this hugely like, you know, important marketing tool, and wow, like, you know, people can reach anyone. And then, you know, we're seeing the downsides of that and the struggles with that too. And so, yeah, I think in the next few years, it'll hopefully like kind of settle, and there'll probably also be a lot more regulations around these types of things too.
Do you think that, like, obviously you've been quite successful in this, and again, a lot of people are on this beat. And it's, you know, the Atlantic is incredible. It's also not the New York Times. It's not like, oh, she just like works for the Times and that's why her articles do well. It's been increasingly hard to get this stuff to travel around, right? Is it the optimism that you think makes you like better at your job than other people? Like why someone who started writing 2 years ago, seriously? Like why you? Why do you think you're doing better?
Well, I think that I'm the best person to cover this beat for a few things. Like one, I think that like I developed this beat, so I helped like make like my specific beat, what I cover is completely aligned. It's just stuff that I care about. It's stuff that I'm interested in. And other internet culture reporters, you know, like have developed beats around things that they're interested in or whatever. But I think the beat that I developed is very like resonant to a lot of mainstream audience now, because like there's been so much now more interest around influencers, memes, all these things. So that's kind of like worked out well for me in the sense that I think I define this beat. And now people that are like trying to hop on the beat after, like, it's like, okay, but I mean, I know I've only started writing about this stuff 2 years ago, but I've been like immersed in it for 10 years to such a deep level that I have like better sources and I have more like sort of historical knowledge of a lot of the stuff, which I think, you know, people aren't. But it is good. I mean, like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal like write about stuff that I cover, which, you know, or whatever, like that's great to be able to kind of like set that agenda. But I also see a lot of people, you know, like bubbling up and coming up with like different offshoots, you know, like I know there's a lot of other young reporters that probably see my work and are like, wow, that's so cool that I can write about, you know, stuff on the internet, and you know, they'll probably take the beat in their own ways. But I work really, really, really hard, and I also don't do stories that anybody else does. Like if somebody else writes a story, then I don't care about it. I'll never write it. So like it's kind of like that's been a focus for me too. I don't know. I care.
Do you have any heartbreakers that like you were working on that someone else came out? And
oh yeah, all the time. I mean, that Instagram egg fucked me over. Like promised me an exclusive, gave it to the New York Times, like whatever, no big deal. I blocked them and will never talk to them again. So
fucked over by the egg. You can't go back on your exclusive.
That egg was like, I was at a dinner once, and I was at this Instagram hosted this dinner for reporters like shortly after all that broke, and like that egg had like promised exclusives to like so many reporters, and we were all just like, damn it, screwed us all. But you know, it's funny, I feel like The Atlantic gives me an advantage in a lot of ways where it's actually a brand that like, it's a great brand because you have so much freedom and flexibility. Like if I was at, you know, a daily newspaper or CNN or something, it's like you're very beholden to like breaking news and you know, doing the daily story and writing things in like a very newspaper fashion or writing things for TV. And you know, The Atlantic is all about sort of like ideas, and it's more about like, I hate the word thought leadership, so I can't believe I'm going to use it, but like something like that. It's very much about that, and that's so ingrained to the culture of The Atlantic, and I think it's why I'm a good fit. Like my writing is a good fit there. I don't have to do as much like. Can I say one more thing also?
Yes, please.
Okay, so another thing is that before I decided to become a reporter, I like thought about it a lot, and for the past like almost 8 years, I have a spreadsheet where every time I like a story, I put the spreadsheet on, I put the reporter on, and I write like what I liked about it and stuff. And I feel like, I mean, I didn't go to journalism school, but I think like doing things like that and also working in social media strategy where you see what stories perform well and you have such a good understanding of like audience and you know, like personal brand development and stuff, like helped me a lot, because when it was time to promote my own stories and like try to make a name for myself in journalism, like I feel like I used a lot of that to my advantage.
I mean, I think it's something we talk about on the show that is not as much of a part of influencer culture as I'd like, is like this idea of craft, of like getting better at your job, right? Like I think that some influencers think getting better at my job means I'm gaining followers, which is not the same thing. Like that idea of like, you're kind of like on this really fun path right now where like getting more successful and like things are going well. You're not seeing the 10 years of immersing yourself in internet culture and doing all these other things and social media strategy and then the spreadsheets and all of the like hard work to just become a better writer. That like,
and the stuff that my editors do to help me, and just like, you know, working for like a, you know, mass media brand where I can have my voice amplified. Like there's so much behind the scenes, but I know it's always like the people that, I mean, success, if it's done well, it's like people think that it came out of nowhere, and it's like, it's so much work.
What do you think as a reporter, you know, you're certainly your job is very different than an influencer's, but in a lot of ways it's also the same. Entertainment, education, you know. And you know, you obviously understand influencer culture so well. What do you think they could learn from you? And then I'm interested to know what you've learned from covering influencers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about like craft, and I think improving, like viewing it as a craft and like really improving your skills, like whether that's writing, editing, like all of those things, just improving, like your video skills, whatever is important. I think also inserting yourself into the news cycle is really important. So like one thing, if I'm gonna write a story, it's not just like, do I have a good story? Like there's a lot of stories that I hold or sit on or think about, and then it's like you wait for the right hook or the right moment to, write that story or post that story or promote that story. Mm-hmm. And I think with influencers, like you're very much in your own bubble and you can just be promoting things in your own thing. But I think like not just hopping on Instagram trends, but like really thinking about like culture and where it's going and like inserting yourself into the cultural conversation is important. Like, I mean, you could say like some of this stuff with like body positivity or like activism, like things like that, like influencers that recognize that type of stuff and those larger cultural conversations and hopped at it early were able to, grow and make that part of their brand. And so I think it's just, I think it's like reading the news and being aware of culture and like being aware of like where things are going and where sentiments are going around certain things and like, not seeming out of touch, yes. But also recognizing, opportunities to hop on something, and not being afraid to do press. Like, I mean, so many influencers are like, I don't know, like they'll want to be in like a beauty vlog or something, but they, they're nervous to kind of speak out on anything. And I think, having a voice, it doesn't mean that you have to be like a political voice, but just, speaking your mind, having a little bit more personality is good.
Have you had pieces that you were like, especially early on, that you were nervous to come out because you felt like you were taking, I mean, obviously as a reporter, it's harder because, you're not writing editorials, right?
Yeah.
So, but like where you were like, because that's a tough thing, especially if you feel any shred of like imposter syndrome. Yeah. Of like, I don't deserve to be speaking on any of this stuff because like, I feel like the older I get, the more I'm like, I don't fucking know what I'm talking about. I know. And it's nerve-wracking to like take a stand on the internet and say like, well, this is what I believe in. Yeah,
I mean, the good thing about it is like, with reporting, it's like you have so much to back it up. So it's like, you don't really have to you can make a stand, but it's like a reported argument, I guess is what people call it. So it's like, here's this argument, but I'm presenting it, with this wealth of evidence behind me. So I'm going to make a call about something. Yeah. The stories that I've been nervous to publish are ones where there's going to be backlash from a company or something. Mm-hmm. Those are always the more stressful ones. You don't want to alienate people, but whatever. You just got to post it. And also, actually, I think that I've noticed that always endears people to you. Like I wrote this I did a profile of Scott Rogowski, the host of HQ, that was, I don't know, it was this whole thing, but the CEO screamed at me and it was all on the record. I posted it. And it's funny because like now he like reaches out to me and like wants to, whatever. Like, and it's weird how like sometimes I think if people think that you're a fair, honest person, and you're not like screwing anyone over or just lashing out, they actually respect you for speaking out. So, I don't know what that equivalent is, or like what the equivalent is in like the beauty world, but I would say, like maybe speaking out on a product that was bad or something.
Well, I mean, this is a big problem I have with the whole space. Is like there's no negative reviews.
I know.
There's like you can't love everything.
Right.
It's impossible.
No.
And like I think influencers would do so well to just like every once in a while, once a month, be like, you know what? I had high hopes for this product, tried it, didn't like it. Yeah, and also it's hard, I'm a people pleaser too, and so like, it's hard because it's like maybe you meet, the head of that CEO and he's a great guy and it's like you don't want to seem like an asshole, but you got to be honest and you got to just do it and do it in a way that's fair. And if you do it in a way that's fair, people respect you and they actually usually want to work with you more because it's like, oh, tell me how I can improve, Right, and like, if you say my next product is great, then I know you actually... Exactly, you mean it, But I think that like, that is a simmering issue that could become a huge one of just like, there's no honesty about product because like everything is sponsored, or you're like thinking about my next sponsored post and I don't want to alienate this company because they could pay me one day. It's bad. So second part of that question though, like you throwing yourself into this culture, is there anything you've learned from influencers or picked up that you feel like has helped you? Yeah, I feel like I've learned a lot. I mean, in terms of like branding myself, for lack of a better word, I think I've thought a lot about that. I mean, it's hard too because like it's so cringy. You never want to be like, I'm an expert, or like you don't want to feel like those like marketing gurus. No, like, you don't want to be. But I think like I've thought a lot about like sort of like how I present myself and how I like communicate what I write about to a more mainstream audience. There's actually a bunch of other
internet culture reporters that are amazing, but I think are almost like more internet-y, and so I think don't reach that mainstream audience, like some that are better than me. And, you know, but they don't speak to that mainstream audience. And so like, I wanted to make sure like when I was writing about this stuff that I'm able to speak to a mainstream audience. So it's something that, I don't know, I think about that with influencers where I've seen a lot of people like I follow are like good, but they only appeal to this like fandom or like they only appeal, you know, and it's like you have to kind of broaden yourself and be like, I don't know, open to going a little bit more mainstream.
And sometimes that means like diluting the complexity of the message, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it does. I mean, I definitely like, you know, I'm not going to get into like weird, deep, like obscure meme stuff, right? That's going to just alienate people or like make people confused in my stories, or if I'm on a talk show or something talking about something, like I know my audience and I just want to make sure that I speak to it. Also, like being out there 100% and like hustling and putting yourself out there. Like, I mean, a lot of reporters are like, I mean, like they're true journalists, like people that went to journalism school that are like amazing reporters, but they don't view their job as like, they don't even think about like, you know, the photo that goes on their story as much. Like it's very much like written journalism craft, much less like promoting it. Like that was sort of seen as like just gauche and like bad and kind of thing. And I think like me also coming from like social media background, like you know, promotion is something that I build into every story. So it's like after a story goes live, like I want to be online for 10 hours, like promoting it, like emailing producers, tweeting at people, like you should cover this, trying to get my work aggregated. Like, so that's just another way to like extend your brand, which I feel like influencers are good at about like promotion. I think and some influencers could get better at that because they put it out on their own feed and they're not thinking about like, you know.
You sometimes expect like, I put this out, success should just come to me. And it doesn't work that way.
Or like, oh, my followers are going to share it. It's like, no, you should be making sure that you're getting written up on blogs, that you're, you know, out there doing TV opportunities, like, you know, making those connections.
And what do you think, like, you know, we talked a bunch about the weirder parts of the internet, and you cover both, right? You cover the like more, influencer culture isn't mainstream, but like for this audience, obviously it is mainstream. What do you think influencers, especially influencers that are like, you know, my age or older, can learn from what's happening and what you're seeing in the younger parts of the internet? Like, what should they prepare themselves for? I think you spoke well earlier, being like, you probably can't do it. You know, like you can't just totally embrace it. But like, can you learn anything? Is there anything you'd be like suggesting someone change their behavior or think about?
I would think about like, I mean, broader, I mean, it's so cringy when you see some old person trying to be like, not that like even 35 is old, but it's just like, it's kind of hard to like you're never gonna, I mean, I'm like in my 30s too, so, you know, you're not gonna like be a teen. I actually feel like that helps me in my reporting where I'm very explicitly like not a teen and not trying to relate to them because that just makes them feel weird. But I think like, you know, picking up on larger trends, maybe around like consumerism or the way people talk, you know, there's a lot of like, you know, backlash against things or trends, like maybe, you know, younger people are using more like organic or, you know, there's a whole wellness trend. And so how do you want to position yourself, you know, in light of that, knowing that maybe younger people care about the products more in their skincare or something? Like, how does that affect the brands that you work with? Like, so that you kind of still resonate to that audience. I also think like just being accessible and talking to younger influencers, like there's a lot of young people that actually would be like dying to talk to you as like a successful influencer, you know, that you're what they aspire to be. So I think it's like opening a dialogue with them too, and you know, seeing if there is room for collaboration in some way, like you know, and not being like, oh, it's like me against them type thing, but you know, helping lift them up. Like it, you know, if you think about this, I keep bringing it back to YouTubers, but like it's a lot of like aging YouTubers will like sort of mentor younger YouTubers, and
like the whole drama recently.
Tati and James, but it's so true, and it's a way for them to stay relevant. Like it's a way for them to kind of like claim these like very young successful people early and be like, they're in my circle, therefore I'm still relevant, you know? And it kind of, I mean, that's like a very cynical reading of it, but it's also like, you know, they both learn from each other, they both can collaborate.
I think it's probably an honest reading of it. I mean, it's no different than music.
Totally.
I mean, look at every aging musician who like is trying to get on like a hook with some new, I mean, Kanye's been great at this as well, of just like finding those like, you know, I feel like his last album, he was very into those like emo SoundCloud rappers.
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah.
You know, trying to be like, I own this now. This is me now. I have this. You know,
exactly.
As they do start to notice that they're fading from relevancy.
Yeah, you got to just keep on top of everything.
So we're like waiting. Kanye's next album will probably be country. It's just gonna be like Kanye in a cowboy
Old
hat.
Town Road.
Old Town Road, like the whole way through.
Well, he already had the release party in like Nevada or Montana or whatever.
He's gonna release it on TikTok, and like that's gonna be it. It's gonna be a lot. Thank you so much.
This was so
great. That was fantastic.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I'm sure most of the people watching have read your articles. If not, it is worth just going to the Atlantic, finding your kind of all of your bylines and reading through them, because I think, you know, you don't put out one a week even.
Yeah,
right?
no, I don't write that much. I mean, everything I write is like a feature length, so maybe once a week, maybe around once a week,
but I
like
think
once
that,
every
like,
10 days.
I think if you don't, you know, follow her, if you don't follow her, I'm like 2 whiskeys in, this is the accent comes out. If you don't follow Taylor on Twitter and Instagram, you should, because I just think like as a person who is creating in this world, you need to be, like, she does such a good job.
Thank you. Well, I would say reach out to me too. Like,
Yeah.
I love hearing from people. I love hearing from people, and I always get story ideas from things. So, I mean, I love hearing from influencers.
There you go.
You know,
Picture
happy to
people.
quote people in stories if they tell me, you know, interesting things. So, so definitely DM me.
Yeah, and getting quoted in one of Taylor's articles gets you like, you know, I get random people coming out of the woodwork every time you quote me.
A lot of people being like, yeah, my mom.
I saw you in the Atlantic.
Yeah, that kind of thing. So,
Which is
but that's
great.
cool. Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear from the like broader community too, because I feel like, you know, if you're an influencer, you're so embedded in all of it, and I'm still like one step removed. So.
Yeah, and I think it's a good lesson, as you said. Like, people think the press is so, like, you can't get to it, right?
Yeah.
And like, if you've got a thing that you see that's happening in the world that people aren't talking about, like, reach out, right?
Yeah.
Because I think...
Just DM me. It's so open. And it can be off the record. I think people are also nervous because they don't want to feel like, you know, but it's always off the record in the DMs. And
a good reporter's, not gonna...
No. Also, like, I mean, unless you're like maybe the CEO of YouTube and you tell me something in the DM.
Right.
But even then, it's great to hear from people. And it was so great. I'm so glad we got to talk Tumblr and all of these old things. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
well, maybe we'll do this again in a year. We'll see where we're at.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.